Hi there. It's time once again, I have had for a chapter of Fanchon the Cricket by George Sand. This is chapter 6. The idea that Sylvanette might perhaps have destroyed himself passed from the mind of the mother to that of Landry as easily as a fly enters the web of a spider, and he lost no time in seeking for his brother, filled with grief and saying to himself as he went along, "Perhaps my mother was right when she reproached me for being hard-hearted on former occasions, but just now Sylvanette must be cruel indeed to give such pain to our poor mother and me." He ran hither and thither, but to no purpose, calling aloud upon his name, but receiving no reply, and asking all whom he met if they could give him news of his brother. At last, finding himself to the right of the meadow bordering on the stream, he entered, remembering that it contained a nook, to which Sylvanette was very partial. This was a large gap which the river had made in one of the banks by washing down 2 or 3 trees, which in their fall had lodged across the stream, their roots in the air. Farmer Barbeau, sacrificing the timber, had left them undisturbed, as, from the manner in which they lay, the earth still clinging to the roots, they offered an effectual resistance to the water, which every winter made much havoc, stealing a piece from the meadow. Landry approached this cleft, and instead of giving himself time to turn the corner where, with their own hands, they had constructed a flight of steps from clods of turf, stones, and roots of trees, he sprang at once as far down as he could, that he might arrive the more quickly at the bottom, since on the right bank of the ravine the undergrowth was so thick that, supposing his brother to be there, he could not see him without descending. Landry entered in great emotion, for ever in his mind was the idea suggested by his mother that Sylvanette had put an end to his days. He passed and repassed among the foliage, beating the bushes in all directions, calling "Sylvanette!" and whistling to the dog, who had doubtless followed him, since neither he nor his young master had been seen at the house through the day. But Landry might have searched and called forever. He was alone on the cleft. Accustomed, however, thoroughly to complete what he once undertook, he proceeded to examine both banks in search of footmarks or such disturbance of the ground as might indicate the whereabouts of his brother. It was a sad and perplexing search, for it was more than a month since Landry had been in that spot, and had he known it as he knew his own hand, it was impossible but some change must have taken place. The right bank was covered with grass. Indeed, the whole of the cleft was so overgrown with rushes that not a corner was to be found where the trace of a footmark might be left. At length, after a long and fruitless search, Landry discovered the track of a dog, and further on a spot where the leaves were crushed, as though Ferrot, or some other dog of his size, had there curled himself round to sleep. This only increased his alarm, and he proceeded afresh to examine the high bank of the river, where he fancied he could detect a recent mark, as if made by the foot of a person springing or sliding down. And though this might easily have been the work of one of those large water rats with which such places abound, he was so terrified that, his limbs failing him, he fell upon his knees and commended himself to God. The poor lad remained thus for some time, possessing neither courage nor strength to go and tell of what he had discovered, gazing on the river with his eyes full of tears, as though he would ask of the placid waters what had become of his brother. And all this while the river flowed tranquilly on, as rivers do, rippling among the branches and reeds which bathed in its stream, breaking on the shores with a low gurgling sound, as of someone indulging in half-suppressed mockery and laughter. Cruel nature. Landry allowed his imagination to run away with him, till, losing all self-command from a trifling appearance which might presage nothing, he found cause to despair. "This wicked and silent river," thought he, "which would let me weep on forever without restoring to me my brother, is deepest in this very spot, where so many trunks of trees have fallen across it, that were anyone to fall in, they would never escape. Alas, my poor brother may perhaps be lying there at the bottom of the water, but a few steps from me, and I am neither able to see nor assist him." At this reflection, his sorrow burst out afresh. afresh, and he vented reproaches upon himself. Never in his life had he known such misery. At length the idea occurred to him to go and consult Mother Fadette, a learned woman who resided at the end of the meadow close to the road which leads to the ford. This woman, who had no other property than her little garden and house, did not find it necessary to work for her living, inasmuch as her knowledge of the troubles and disasters of this world had established so famous a repute that people came from all quarters to consult her. Equally celebrated was she for secret and mysterious cures of wounds, sprains, and other maladies of the kind. And for not a little of the faith reposed in her was she indebted to the cure of diseases which never existed. She no dummy. For my own part, I never gave entire faith to such tales, any more than I would award implicit belief to the fact that she could cause an old and ill-conditioned cow to give as good milk as a young one. Okay, that's a trick. But for the valuable remedies with which she was in reality acquainted, for her sovereign plasters for cuts and burns, for the drinks which she composed to allay fever, there is no doubt she earned her money honestly, and that many sick people were cured when the doctor's drugs would have killed. At least she said so. And those whom she had saved preferred taking her word to risking the consequences of unbelief. And in the country, all knowledge is held to be sorcery. Many thought that Mother Fadette knew more than she cared to own, and to her was therefore attributed the power of finding lost things and persons. In short, as her superior judgment and cleverness enabled her to assist people out of their troubles where it was possible, they inferred that she could do it where it was not. Okay. The power of old women. The powers of the crone. It is well known that all children listen eagerly to marvelous stories, and adults too. Landry had heard it said at La Priche that Mother Fadette, by means of certain seed which she threw upon the water, at the same time muttering a few words, abracadabra, could cause the body of a drowned person to be found. The seed thus prepared floated with the current of the water, and there, where it was seen to stop, the body was sure to be discovered. Many peasants attribute the same virtue to consecrated bread, and there are few mills in which some is not kept for this purpose. Landry had none. Mother Fadette lived close to the meadow, and grief does not leave the reason too clear. For sure. Behold him then running to the cottage of Mother Fadette, relating his trouble and begging her to return to the cleft to find his brother, living or dead. Now Mother Fadette, who did not like to see her reputation endangered, and who never willingly exercised her talent for nothing, not only jeered at our poor Landry, but drove him harshly away. She had been dissatisfied in times past because La Saguette had been employed in her place in the family of Farmer Barbeau. Landry, who was naturally proud, would perhaps at any other time have been angry, though he was now so overwhelmed and distressed that he said not a word, but returned to the cleft, determined to prosecute his search in the water, though he neither knew how to dive nor to swim. But as he was walking along, his head bowed down and his eyes fixed upon the ground, he felt someone tap on the shoulder, and turning beheld the granddaughter of Mother Fadette, called in these parts the Little Fadette, partly because it was her family name, and partly because people would have it that she also was somewhat of a sorceress. Now Fadette, or Farfadet, which in some places is also called Follette, is a hobgoblin, harmless, but given to mischief and fun. The same term is also applied to fairies, though the belief in them is rapidly dying away. People often mistook Little Fadette for one of those spirits, so small, thin, and weather-beaten, and disheveled did she appear, kind of like me. Lively as a butterfly, curious as a robin redbreast, and dark as a cricket. Oh, see why I loved this story. Now, when I compare the little Fadette to a cricket, it is to let you know that she was not handsome. For this little insect of the fields is even more ugly than that of the hearthstone. Really. Still, if ever as a child you remember having played with one, teasing it in your sabbat, you ought to know that it has by no means a stupid or unmeaning countenance, but one more likely to provoke laughter than tears. Thus the children of La Casse, who are as quick as others in discerning likenesses and drawing comparisons, called little Fadette the cricket, whenever they wished to enrage her, and sometimes even by way of kindness. For they stood in some little fear of her, and did not altogether despise her, because she told them long stories, and taught them new games of her own invention. Now there is a little note here. Okay. Paulette, Will of the Wisp. But all these names and surnames make me almost forget that which she had received at her baptism, and which the reader may perhaps desire hereafter to know. She was called Françoise, and therefore her grandmother, who did not approve of nicknames, always called her Fanchon. Okay, is Fanchon not a nickname for Françoise? Maybe they mean like La Follette. As for some time past there had been a feud between the family of La Bessonnière and Mother Fadette, the twins never spoke much to Fanchon. They even entertained, as it were, an aversion for her, and never willingly played either with her or her brother, the grasshopper, as he was called, who was still more cunning and mischievous than herself. Was always at her side, getting into a rage when she ran too fast for him, throwing stones at her when she mocked him, and often enraging her more than she desired, since she was of a gay humor, and disposed to treat everything as a jest. But such strange notions prevailed concerning Mother Fadette that many children, and more especially those of Farmer Barbeau, imagined that the cricket and the grasshopper would bring misfortune upon them in any intimacy they might form. This fear, however, was not so strong as to prevent their talking together whenever they met, for, as we have said, the twins were not bashful, and Fanchon seldom failed to accost them with all kinds of jokes and nonsense as soon as she saw them approach. That's darling.